Hi, this is John from Sharp Mountain Games, and today we're taking a look at the Aether Sea, which is a setting book for Fate. And just to give you an idea of, well, what is the Aether Sea, those of us who are a little more seasoned may remember the Spelljammer setting for Dungeons and Dragons, which was that there were ships that could fly through outer space, and instead of adventuring on different continents or different parts of a continent, you adventured on different planets. So it was really a way to take classic fantasy out into space, and that's what the Aether Sea does. So we'll take a look at the book, and then we'll come back and tell you where you can pick it up. So here's the book, The Aether Sea by Edward Turner, and published by Evil Hat, and you can see that it's listed as a world of adventure for Fate, and you can definitely see the idea of flying sailing ships, wooden sailing ships through outer space. And so what they do is they give you an intro sort of to the whole idea and concept and what this part of the galaxy looks like. And there's a place called Homeworld, and the Aether Sea is what the ships fly through. And I'm not going to go through every detail. And as I said, if you're in any way familiar with Spelljammer, it's very similar in that way. Now, one thing I want to point out right off the bat is the writing. And I think that that's particularly interesting. It has a certain tone, almost a Western tone to it. We call it a sea, but that ain't exactly right. So you can see, even like with the use of ain't, it kind of almost an American Western kind of talk, the kind of sort of thing you might hear on Firefly, if you like that program. So they give you sort of an intro to the world, and they talk about how to create a character and the different races or peoples, as I believe they want to call it here. And you do get all the standard fantasy races. You get humans, and you get goblins and dwarves. And I should mention that this uses Fate Accelerated. So you don't have like dexterity and intelligence and wisdom, but you have different approaches. Like orcs tend to be quick, whereas dwarves tend to be very careful in their thinking. And the artwork in here is very, very nice, very professional. Elves and trolls. So those are some of the player races you have. And they're not as many fiddly bits as you'd get in something like Dungeons and Dragons, where you have to write down all the different options. But they do have ways to try to specialize and help you play the different characters. Now, one thing that I think is always interesting, especially in something like Fate, Fate is a bit more freeform than other games. The section on magic is 6 pages. 6 pages. Compare that to other fantasy systems. So the benefit is there's not a lot to learn. The downside is there's not a ton of crunch if that's the kind of system you want. But if that's the kind of system you want, you probably aren't playing Fate. So there's raw magic that just about anybody can do. Now, the trade-off on raw magic is you don't use it in combat. It can take you 10 minutes or so, or a while to figure out the spells. But you have a broad range of spells. Now, if you do want to use them in combat, I think that the trade-off there is, well, then you focus. You focus on something like fire magic or water magic or something like that. So you have to specialize. Now, you don't have to just use raw magic. You can be a more traditional spellcaster. And there you are able to use the magic. And there's different schools. And there are magical artifacts listed in here. So the schools of magic are kind of familiar to anybody, again, who's used played Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy things. There's evocation, where you change reality. Alteration, where you make something act like it's something else, as it says. And animation, where you can animate different objects. And you could certainly, and there's different focuses on those too. Artificing, guardian crafting, spirit summoning. So there is some room to customize those. Now the ships. Now, the interesting thing about the ships is they're treated a lot like the characters, and that they can have different approaches. They do talk about different size ships. Now, they don't give you a whole complement of different types of ships here. There's not pages and pages and descriptions and stats. It's not really that kind of thing. The ship is a way to get you from place to place. But there is information about, well, how do you do starship combat or ship-to-ship combat? And nice illustration there. And talks about, well, how do you fly in the sea? But it also talks about, interestingly, well, how do you get repairs and your resources? This is really set up more where you're like an independent trader. Again, I think Firefly is a good example, Or if you wanted to talk about Star Wars, it would be more like you were the crew of a ship like the Millennium Falcon, flying from port to port and barely earning enough money to keep things afloat. Now, it does have a sample adventure, and I think that's always good, especially for settings like this. Now, you can see I have a huge tree floating here in outer space, and I wonder if they took their inspiration from Larry Niven's book, The Integral Trees. And it's kind of a classic setup where the players are in this sector and they get arrested basically for a crime they didn't commit. There was an explosion on a mining vessel, and if they want to get out of this, they have to kind of cooperate and play along and try and bring in the real culprits. And of course, there's the bar where you can go do some role playing, and you find out there's some political instability, and there's an elven mining group that may have caused the explosion. Now, one thing you'll notice here is, they give you some information on the NPCs, which is nice, but you're not seeing maps. This isn't really a dungeon crawl. It's a little bit more open-ended, probably better as a little bit more theater of the mind as you go through. And there are a lot of choices. Fate really emphasizes that the player choices make difference. It's not a railroad. And it talks about all the different things you might do. And in fact, you might even decide to put a bomb on the flagship. You might actually decide to help the insurgents. So there's all kind of options in here. I guess it's going to depend on your group and what way they decide to go. So that's the adventure that they give you. And they give you some information, some adventure seeds where you might go next. So that's the Aether Sea by Edward Turner. And I have the links down below. You can get the print product at Amazon and the PDF at Drive-Thru. And if you are interested in the print product, now the book is 44 pages. And from what I understand, Evil Hat is not going to be producing any more individual setting books, the shorter books. So if you are interested in it, you might want to pick it up soon. Otherwise, you'll have to look for it on the used market. What they're doing is they're combining, and they're doing like Fate Worlds. I know there's Fate Worlds on Fire, Fate Worlds Rise Up, and I think there's another one. And we're going to take a look at one of those in another future video. So thanks very much for watching. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, we have the links for all the Sharp Mountain Games products. Some of them are print and some of them are PDF, and all the links are down below. And even if you just want to go take a look, that'd be great. So thanks very much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.